Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to change your life, you've got to start by changing what you believe. Not just what you say you believe when people are listening, but what you really believe deep down when you're alone, when life isn't making sense, when the pressure is on and your back is against the wall. Because let's be honest, those core beliefs are running the show. They're the ones steering your decisions, shaping your expectations, and writing the script of your daily life. See, a lot of us are asking God for a new life, but we're trying to live it with the same old mindset. We're wanting breakthrough while still believing things like, I'll never be good enough, or people like me don't get ahead, or I always mess things up. And then we wonder why nothing changes. But let me tell you something. Your feet can't go where your mind refuses to follow. If your thinking is stuck, your life will stay stuck. You can go to church every Sunday, sing the songs, say the right words, but if your belief system is rooted in fear, shame, or insecurity, you'll sabotage the very things you're praying for. Why? Because the mind is powerful. It's the control center, and if your mind is full of lies, your life will reflect those lies, whether you realize it or not. A belief is like a filter. It colors how you see the world, how you interpret your circumstances, and how you respond to opportunities. If deep down you believe you're unworthy, then even when a door opens, you'll find a reason not to walk through it. You'll say things like, that's not for me, or they probably made a mistake, or I'll just mess it up anyway. And here's the thing, it's not the door that's the problem. It's the belief. The enemy doesn't have to chain you up to keep you stuck. He just has to get you to chain yourself. And those chains, they often come in the form of thoughts you've repeated so many times, they feel like truth. I'm not smart enough. I don't have what it takes. I've messed up too much. Thoughts like that may have been planted years ago by a parent, a teacher, a toxic relationship, or even your own mistakes. But now those lies have grown roots, and they're not just sitting quietly in the background. They're shaping your present and deciding your future. I know what it feels like to live under those beliefs, to wake up every morning and feel like you're already behind, already disqualified, to watch other people step into boldness and think, that's just not me. But the truth is, you were never meant to live small. God didn't create you to live from a place of fear or defeat. But until your belief system aligns with that truth, you'll keep circling the same mountains. That's why it's not enough to just want change. You've got to believe for it. And not just believe that God can do it, but that He can do it in you. There's a difference. A lot of us believe God is powerful. We believe He can heal, restore, promote, transform. But when it comes to ourselves, we hesitate. We disqualify ourselves. We think we're the exception to His goodness. And that right there is a belief issue. What you tolerate in your thinking, you give permission to exist in your life. So if you keep entertaining thoughts that tell you you're unworthy, incapable, or stuck, you'll live that way. Not because it's true, but because belief gives it power. You weren't born believing you could. You didn't come into this world thinking you were too broken, too late, too much, or not enough. You didn't crawl out of the womb with anxiety about your worth or shame over your past. That stuff. It got planted somewhere along the way through words, wounds, rejection, repetition, disappointment, failure. Those thoughts took root. You learned to believe small. You were taught to play it safe. You started thinking in limitations instead of possibilities. And here's the truth. If it was learned, it can be unlearned. Some of us are walking around with a belief system that was shaped more by our pain than by God's promises. We've let experiences define us. We've let what someone said at 13 write the script for how we live at 35. One harsh word, one betrayal, one moment of failure, and we latched onto it like it was the final truth. You're not smart enough. You're too sensitive. You'll never make it without me, or maybe it wasn't what someone said. It was what they didn't say. The absence of affirmation can be just as loud as an insult. A silent father, an absent mother, friends who didn't stand up for you, teachers who overlooked you. That silence spoke and it told you something false about who you are. But friend, that lie doesn't have to live forever because it's not your identity. It's a learned belief. And anything that was learned can be unlearned, replaced, and rewired. God never meant for your history to hijack your destiny. But He also won't override your will. That means you've got to get in the game. You've got to partner with Him in the process. And it starts with recognizing that some of what you've accepted as just the way I am is actually just a belief you've been rehearsing for years. It's not who you are. It's just what you believe. And beliefs can be broken. Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Not by wishing, not by striving, not by ignoring the pain, but by renewing. That means a process, a journey, a reprogramming. It means pulling out the old and planting the new. It means recognizing when a thought pops up and saying, well, wait a second, where did that come from? And who told me that? Because if the root is a lie, the fruit will always be bondage. You have to become a detective of your thoughts. Don't just feel them, examine them, question them. If it doesn't align with what God says about you, don't let it sit in your mind rent-free. Too many people are defeated not because they aren't capable, but because they've agreed with a lie. An agreement is powerful. When you agree with truth, you walk in freedom. But when you agree with a lie, you build a prison. Think about it like this. A computer doesn't run on emotion. It runs on programming. And if there's a glitch in the code, the whole system malfunctions. You can click the right buttons and still get the wrong result because the program isn't aligned. It's the same with your mind. You can say the right things, go to the right places, be around the right people, but if your internal programming is filled with self-doubt and limiting beliefs, you'll keep sabotaging your own progress. But the good news is you don't have to stay stuck. You have access to the truth. You have access to new programming, and truth isn't just a concept, it's a weapon. Every time you replace a lie with truth, you're taking back ground. You're rewiring your responses. You're shifting your identity, not into someone you're not, but into who you were always meant to be. Because the enemy wants you to believe that the lie is permanent, but it's not. It's just been on repeat for so long that it feels like truth, but it's not. And just like a song that's been stuck in your head for days, you can change the track. You can break the cycle. You can unlearn the limitation. Renewing your mind isn't something you do once and check off the list like it's a completed chore. It's not a one-time prayer, a single sermon, or a weekend retreat that fixes everything. It's a daily decision, an ongoing process, a commitment you make every single day, even on the days you don't feel like it, especially on the days you don't feel like it. See, your mind doesn't stay renewed just because you had a good Sunday. Just like your body doesn't stay clean because you showered last week. You don't skip brushing your teeth for a month and expect your breath to smell fresh. In the same way, you can't skip mental renewal and expect to think with peace, confidence, and clarity. The battle is daily, so the choice has to be daily. Thoughts don't just drift into righteousness, they drift toward fear, insecurity, doubt, and negativity. That's the default mode of a mind that's left unattended. If you don't take authority over your thoughts will take authority over you. And let me tell you, the enemy loves an unchecked mind. Because when your thoughts run wild, your life runs off course. That's why Scripture tells us to take every thought captive. That's not casual language. That's intentional, that's warfare. Think of your mind like a garden. If you don't plant something good, weeds will grow on their own. You don't have to try to grow weeds. They show up by default. Negativity? Default. Worry, default. Self-doubt, default. You've got to be intentional if you want to grow something different. You've got to pull the weeds daily and plant the seeds of truth. You can't renew your mind with yesterday's faith. You need fresh truth for today's battle. And renewing your mind doesn't mean you never hear a negative thought again. It means you recognize it faster and replace it quicker. That's maturity. That's growth. It's not about never having the lie. It's about not giving it a seat at your table. It's about hearing the thought, you're not enough, and responding with, that's not what God says about me. It's about training yourself to reject anything that doesn't line up with truth. But here's the part we don't always talk about. It takes discipline. It's work. And sometimes it's inconvenient. You might have to pause your day to speak truth out loud when a lie creeps in. You might have to turn off that TV show that's stirring up comparison. You might have to stop mid-conversation and say, you know what? I shouldn't have said that. Let me rephrase it. That's what renewing the mind looks like in real life. Not always glamorous, not always loud, but powerful. And you know what else? Sometimes it feels like it's not working. Sometimes you'll be renewing your mind, speaking truth, doing everything right, and the old thoughts still show up. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're in a process, and process isn't proof of failure. It's proof of healing. Don't let the presence of a thought make you think nothing's changing. Change happens in layers. It's like peeling an onion, one layer at a time. You get stronger with each choice, more grounded with each truth, more free with each day you show up and do the work. Now you might be thinking, but I've been doing this, and it's hard. Yes, it is. Growth is hard. Healing is hard. But staying stuck is harder. Living every day in fear and insecurity, that's exhausting. Pretending to be okay when your mind is full of torment, that's miserable. And if you're going to fight a battle, why not fight the one that leads to freedom? The beautiful thing about renewing your mind is that you're not doing it alone. God is with you in it. You're not trying to fix yourself. You're aligning with truth. You're showing up daily and saying, I may not feel strong today, but I know the truth. I know who I am. I know what God says about me. And when you do that, even if it feels small, heaven moves. Every act of obedience matters. Every moment of truth spoken matters. Every time you say no to the lie and yes to the truth, something shifts inside you, even if you don't see it yet. Even if it's happening quietly. Even if it feels like just another ordinary day, there's power in your mouth that you might not even realize. And I don't mean that in some fluffy, feel-good, motivational way. I mean spiritually, biblically, practically. The words you speak are not just sounds or syllables. They are seeds. And every seed produces something. What you speak, you start to believe. What you believe, you start to live. And what you live becomes your reality. If you keep saying, I'll never change, don't be surprised when your life looks the same year after year. If you constantly say things like, I'm always anxious, I'm just bad with people, or nothing good ever lasts for me, then your words are building a script in your subconscious. And whether you realize it or not, you're following it. Let's get real here. A lot of people are stuck in cycles, not because they're cursed, but because they keep cursing themselves with their own words. We say things we would never want to be true, and then we wonder why we feel so heavy, so discouraged, so blocked. Your words are forming the lens through which you see your life, and if the lens is cracked, your view will be too. The Bible says a life and death are in the power of the tongue. That's not symbolic. That's truth. And it means what you speak can either bring life to your situation or choke it out. You don't get to speak defeat all week and expect to live in victory. You can't talk down to yourself and expect to walk in confidence. You can't call yourself a failure and then wonder why you're afraid to take risks. That's not God punishing you. That's you programming your own mind with limitation. Now let me tell you something important. What you say out loud eventually becomes what you believe inside. That's why affirmations matter. That's why declarations matter. And I'm not talking about hype or fluff. I'm talking about lining your words up with truth. If God says you're chosen, why are you still calling yourself rejected? If God says you are more than a conqueror, why are you constantly saying, I can't take this anymore? If he says you're fearfully and wonderfully made, why is your inner dialogue still stuck on I'm not enough? You can't live in freedom while talking like a prisoner. You can't move forward while your mouth is pulling you back. What you say doesn't just reveal your thoughts. It reinforces them. It echoes them. So if you're speaking fear, fear gets louder. If you're speaking faith, faith rises up. Words are like fuel. They feed whatever they're attached to. Sometimes the greatest breakthrough comes not from changing your situation, but from changing your confession. Because your confession sets the atmosphere. Your words invite God into the moment, or they magnify your mess. And I get it. It's not easy. It feels awkward at first. Saying things like, I am strong, or I'm equipped, or I am deeply loved, when you don't feel that way. It feels fake. But hear me on this. It's not fake, it's faith. Faith speaks the truth even before it feels true. You have to train your mouth to declare what your spirit knows, even when your emotions disagree. Emotions are real, but they're not always right. And if you wait until you feel like speaking truth, you'll stay silent when it matters most. So speak anyway. Declare anyway. Say it out loud even if your voice shakes. Because every time you speak the truth, you're rewriting the script that's been playing in your head for years. And let me tell you, there's a script. Every person has one. That internal narrative that runs like background music. And for many of us, that script is full of doubt, fear, insecurity, and shame. But just because it's been playing for a long time doesn't mean it's the right one. You have the authority to change it. You don't have to live according to a story that was never written by God. You can start speaking the truth of who you are and what you carry. You can speak what heaven says about you, not what your past says, not what people say, not what your trauma says. Your voice can be used to set a new rhythm in your soul, to plant new beliefs, to break old chains. And it doesn't take fancy language. It just takes faith and consistency. Because the tongue may be small, but it directs your whole life like a rudder steers a ship. You can't just hope your way into transformation. You've got to move. You've got to act. You've got to put your faith into motion. Because faith by itself, without action, becomes a wish, and action without faith becomes strong. But when you put them together, that's when change happens. That's when strongholds break. That's when mindsets shift and habits start to fall apart at the root. Too many people are waiting for change to just happen. They're waiting for the fear to go away before they step out. They're waiting to feel strong before they act strong. They're waiting for the anxiety to leave before they try again. But that's not how God works. That's not how transformation happens. He doesn't say wait until you feel fearless. He says fear not. That's a command. That's a choice. That's an action you take in faith even when fear is present. Look at the Bible. Every person who did something significant had to take a step before they saw the miracle. The walls of Jericho didn't fall before the marching. They fell after. Peter didn't walk on water until he got out of the boat. The woman with the issue of blood wasn't healed by wishing Jesus would notice her. She crawled through the crowd, touched his robe, and her faith made her whole. See the pattern? Faith acted. Faith moved. Faith didn't wait for perfect conditions. Some people are praying for a breakthrough, but won't change a single behavior. They're asking for peace, but still feeding their minds with chaos. They're asking for confidence while speaking insecurity over themselves every morning. They want God to do the impossible, but they're not doing the possible. Faith is not passive. It doesn't sit on the couch waiting for a sign in the sky. Faith says, I don't see it yet, but I'm going to move like it's already mine. Now, let me tell you, action doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always about quitting your job or moving to another city. Sometimes it looks like waking up 15 minutes earlier to renew your mind in the Word. Sometimes it's choosing to forgive, even though your emotions still want revenge. Sometimes it's reaching out for help, joining a support group, going to therapy, opening up to someone you trust. Those aren't small things. Those are bold acts of faith. Because you're saying, I'm not staying here. I'm not staying stuck. I'm participating in my own healing. You don't have to have it all figured out to take a step. You don't need a 5-year plan before you obey. You just need to be willing. Willing to do it scared. Willing to do it tired. Willing to do it uncomfortable. Willing to trust that even when it feels like nothing is happening, something is. What God honors action taken in faith. He responds to obedience, even when it's quiet and unseen. And let's be honest, change is hard. Not because you're weak, but because the mind resists new patterns. Your brain has been wired to think a certain way for years, and now you're trying to create a new path. That's work. That's spiritual and psychological warfare. It's easier to stay in old cycles. But easier doesn't mean better. Faith says, I'll take the narrow road. I'll do the uncomfortable thing. I'll act on what I believe, not what I feel. And don't forget, your action doesn't have to be huge to be holy. A tiny seed of obedience can grow into a life-changing harvest. You don't have to make a giant leap. You just need to take the next step. That step might be speaking truth over yourself, even when the lies feel louder. It might be getting up and starting again after a setback. It might be choosing discipline when it would be easier to quit. Whatever that step is, take it. Not because you're sure of yourself, but because you're sure of Him. Faith without action is theory. It sounds good, but it doesn't produce results. Action without faith is hustle. It drains you. But when you bring faith and action together, they fuel each other. Faith gives your steps purpose, and action gives your faith expression. They work hand in hand like breath and lungs, like roots and fruit, like vision and movement. You can believe for change all day long, but if you never do anything with that belief, it just stays a wish in your heart instead of becoming a reality in your life. You've got to speak it, yes. But then you've got to walk it out. Not perfectly, not always confidently. but consistently, intentionally, and with the kind of faith that says, I may not see it yet, but I'm going to live like it's coming. One of the biggest lies the enemy loves to whisper is, because of what you've done, this is who you are. And sadly, too many people agree with it. They carry shame like it's part of their identity. They wear regret like a name tag. Unworthy, a damaged, a failure, a not enough. They believe that because something happened to them, or because they did something, they are now permanently labeled by that experience. But hear me loud and clear. Your past is not your identity. It's not your destiny. It's not your definition. God's truth overrides all of it. I don't care what's in your history. There is no story too broken for redemption. There is no mistake so deep that grace can't reach it. There is no sin so strong that the cross didn't already crush it. If you've been living under the weight of shame, I want you to know that is not your portion. That is not from God. That is bondage. And Jesus didn't die so you could live with spiritual chains wrapped around your identity. The problem is we rehearse our past more than we rehearse God's promises. We replay the pain, the bad decisions, the guilt, the missed chances like a movie on repeat. And the more you watch it, the more it becomes your reality. The mind starts to believe that the past is who you are, but it's not. Your past may explain you, but it doesn't define you. God's truth defines you. And He says you are forgiven. You are chosen. You are redeemed. You are made new. There is a reason Scripture says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation doesn't happen when your circumstances change. It happens when your thinking changes. As long as you think like a victim of your past, you'll live like one. As long as you think like someone who's too far gone, you'll act like it. But the moment you choose to believe what God says about you instead of what your past says about you, that's the moment you start to live free. And freedom doesn't always feel like a big explosion. It often looks like daily decision. It's waking up and choosing to believe, I am not what I did. I am not what they said. I am not what I used to be. It's catching those old thoughts and replacing them with truth. It's stopping in the middle of the day and saying, wait, why am I still thinking like the person I used to be when God says I'm made new? That's where the shift begins. And don't let anyone else hold your past over your head either. People love to remind you of who you were. They love to keep you in a box, to replay your history like that's all you'll ever be. But listen, people aren't your judge. God is. And God doesn't just forgive. He restores. He rebuilds. He reclaims every piece of your story and uses it for His glory. What looked like a mess, He turns into a message. What looked like shame, He turns into strength. But you've got to let go of the old labels. You've got to stop agreeing with the lie. You can't walk in your purpose while dragging the weight of who you used to be. That means changing the way you speak about yourself. No more, I'm just broken. No more, I always mess up. No more, I'm not as good as other people. Those are old identities from a chapter that's already closed. God already wrote the next part. He calls you whole, worthy, strong, renewed, righteous. Love. That's your name now. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to receive it. That's what grace does. It gives you what you could never earn. And it calls you things you never believed about yourself. And when you start believing what God says, really believing it, it changes how you live. You stop showing up as the scared, insecure version of yourself and start showing up like someone who knows they've been set free. You stop hiding behind perfectionism and start standing in the power of redemption. Because once you realize that God's truth is greater than your past, you stop asking, what if they find out who I used to be? And start declaring, let me tell you what God's brought me through. You stop being afraid of your testimony and start using it as a weapon against shame. Because shame can't survive where truth is boldly spoken. And when the enemy comes knocking with those old accusations, you'll have a new response, not based on how you feel, but based on who God says you are. Because once you know the truth will make you free. And freedom changes everything.